At this point, My Hero Academia has established itself as an all-time great in the shonen battle genre, and rightly so. Its fights are fun and beautiful with the foundation of rock-solid character writing, and quirks as a system allow for powers that are creative, yet easy to understand. However, My Hero Academia is being held back by Horikoshi's tendency to have a hero's allies arrive at the precise moment the villain is about to win, a quirk of his writing style which has become more problematic with time. I can't find a name for this trope, and the internet freaks out whenever I say Deus Ex Machina, so I'm not sure what to call it. My vote is for Angelus Ex Machina, but I'll just refer to these moments as last-second saves or last-moment interventions for the purpose of this video. Nothing crazy, but spoilers throughout. This is bad for several reasons. The first being that it gets predictable. After the first few arcs, you get a feel for Hori's writing style, and pick up on the tells which precede a last-moment intervention. After a fight is well underway, there will be a moment when the heroes lose control of the situation. The villain will begin an action that, if successful, would have massive negative consequences for the protagonists, whose faces show that they are out of ideas. At this point, if there is an incapacitated ally nearby, they will rejoin the fight. If not, a third party will arrive and save the endangered character. This pattern is not unique to HeroAca. It's actually so widely used that it's probably a human universal, like STDs or slavery. It's a writing convenience that authors occasionally need if they've lost control of a situation, or don't have time for a better transition. But abusing it stops conflicts from building proper tension, especially in a story like My Hero Academia. At this point, we have a pretty good idea of what Horikoshi will and will not do to his characters. If Gran Torino took on a major villain, I'd genuinely get nervous, and Endeavor should just not leave the house at this point. But anyone younger than 20 will be fine, and we know that. Koda was not getting pulverized, Ida was not getting his throat slit, Eri was not getting This is made worse by Recovery Girl, an invaluable tool for world building who has overstayed her welcome. Her powers justified UA's curriculum and allowed for Deku's broken limbs to be a recurring mechanic, but also established that non-fatal injuries are trivial in this universe. If the younger heroes can't be hurt and won't be killed, Horikoshi can keep the stakes high through emotion or character development, but violence itself has no direct consequences, and I wish the show would stop pretending it might. More importantly, abusing this trope detracts from the elements which make this world interesting. Quirks are HeroAca's gimmick. Without them, it would just be real life, and most quirk-related exposition is delivered through combat. When Hori uses a last-second save, he's progressing conflict through luck while downplaying the role of quirks and drifting away from the show's core appeal. When Deku rushes to save Ida, the matchup is not One for All versus Bloodcurdle. Stain is fighting an invisible stopwatch he isn't aware of. Quirks aren't doing anything that couldn't be accomplished with boring, real-world technology. Deku could have shown up with a pistol and the scene would barely change. Now try to do that with Uravity versus Bakugo, or any fight involving All Might. Since it's hard to discuss what is not in a piece of media, let's do a comparison with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the gold standard for clever anime combat and a great example of what HeroAca is not doing. When explaining why JoJo fights are so engaging, fans are quick to bring up the power system, which makes sense. Stands are unparalleled tools for crafting memorable conflict, having powers which are simple in concept, but allow for insane complexity in implementation. However, this couldn't happen without the restraint Araki shows when working through stand battles, something rarely addressed in the discussion surrounding JoJo's. Araki will use all manner of contrived nonsense to get stand users alone with each other, but once a fight gets going, it will continue without interruption until someone wins, with exceptions being rare and well justified. This forces the audience to pay attention, because we want to understand the fight's conclusion, and the smallest detail could be important, as opposed to ending conflict with a cheap cop-out, which wastes time and punishes viewers for paying attention. The final confrontation in Vento Arreo got so convoluted that Araki resorted to drawing flowcharts, but it was impossible to look away, because readers were confident he would find a way to bring it all together, which he did, beautifully. JoJo's also established early on that violence has consequences, and not just for the antagonists. We know that sympathetic characters will be permanently damaged or killed by the end of the part, often with little warning. This gives a real credibility to the danger, especially if the heroes won't get outside help. On the author's end, I think a lot of Araki's creativity comes from his commitment to letting fights play out internally. He writes himself into a corner, then writes himself back out, crafting some of JoJo's weirdest moments in the process. Joseph planting the grenades, Jotaro throwing Iggy, Polnareff hiding in a fish tank. Ask yourself, if Araki was willing to bail out characters by having their friends show up, is there a chance in hell he would have came up with these? I really doubt it. It's worth noting, this is not about realism. My disbelief was shattered by Deku's magical timing, but this has nothing on the contrived nonsense that leads up to stand battles. In a world where special powers are common, you would expect fights to play out as chaotic melees, with both sides trying to get advantage through surprise or numbers. Breaks from reality are a part of fiction, but it has to serve a purpose. Araki's contrived setups are an upfront cost for later brilliance. The constant use of luck in My Hero Academia is actively making the story worse, only serving as a means to let Horikoshi stitch together isolated story beats or end a conflict he's finished with. Also, the placement of a coincidence is more important than how unlikely it is. Imagine a movie's protagonist winning the lottery in the first 10 minutes versus the last 10 minutes. My Hero Academia's writing conveniences happen after the fight gets going, which is why they are so hard to accept. I know this is heresy, but I think Hori might have crafted his best fights by accident. Not that they were total flukes, but his best moments tend to happen when last-second saves are not an option. No one could interfere during the sports festival because it was an organized competition, and the fights in that arc were insanely well received, especially Deku versus Todoroki, which became one of the show's defining moments. Nomu and All For One were shown to be so powerful that anyone but All Might would be wasting their time, and those matchups were just as beloved, with the Nomu fight being my favorite in anime, at least for a month or two. As the story has evolved, we've seen less situations which naturally keep fighters isolated, giving Horikoshi more opportunities to have third parties intervene. And, to be fair, he hasn't taken all of them, but enough to justify this video. For an example of how keeping fights self-contained could improve the show, we can take a look at a character who is surprisingly unaffected by this problem. Everyone's favorite domestic abuser, Bakugo's mom! Anyway, Endeavor almost always fights alone, and as a result has some of the most inventive quirk usage in My Hero Academia, despite the simplicity of his power. Endeavor couldn't reach the flying Nomo, so he did a flaming wall run. The other Nomo kept healing, so he focused his flame and boiled his fucking brains out. Much later, Endeavor has learned how to fly, letting him fight at 100% without roasting bystanders, which ends up being really, really important and helps him win out against a stronger enemy. Not everyone is on board, but it is kinda shocking how well fans are responding to Endeavor's development, and I'd argue that these moments did a lot to smooth things over. In particular, I'd identify executing that Nomu as the turning point for his character. It was the show's first on-screen killing, and a brutal one at that, but also decisive in a way that even All Might would struggle with, and a demonstration of how useful Endeavor really is. We see that the ruthless personality which destroyed his family is also what makes him successful as a hero, making it harder to write him off as a scumbag. We also get a sense that Endeavor wasn't brought down by his faults so much as he was consumed by his virtues, letting the qualities which others valued him for invade every aspect of his life until he couldn't function as a husband or father. Understanding how he went wrong lets us imagine an Endeavor who kept his mind healthy and became a truly admirable person, which makes it easier to support him once he decides to get better. All that from Horikoshi putting a hero in a no-win situation and having them overcome it through creative use of their quirk rather than help from a convenient busybody. As to why Endeavor is not affected by this problem, it's no secret that Horikoshi builds fights around character development, and for an antisocial hardass like Endeavor, this means short, brutal fights which happen in relative isolation. He's also one of the strongest characters in universe, to the point that basically anyone but All Might would just get in his way, assuming they wanted the help in the first place. I'll point out this is another instance of unrelated circumstances discouraging last-second saves and improving the story by accident. Recent changes in the manga actually have me worried that Endeavor will start to suffer from the same problems as other heroes. Now that All Might's retired, the strongest enemies are no longer reserved for him, and if High End was any indication, we can expect to see Endeavor getting more overwhelmed as the story continues. Hawks is both strong in the areas Endeavor is weak, and one of the few characters capable of putting up with his bullshit, making it likely that Endeavor's resourcefulness will be replaced by a new emphasis on teamwork and leadership. Also, on a character level, the self-imposed isolation which has defined his life up until now is starting to go away, and, knowing Hori, his fights will change to reflect this. Getting back to HeroAca in general, I've noticed that even when a fight is allowed to play out, there's often a third party who wants to interfere, but for some reason cannot. And I think this might explain where this problem is coming from. As early as the slime monster, Horikoshi has shown us that, to him, a hero is someone who chooses to get involved, and this is ultimately what sets them apart from normal people. So, from his perspective, a world of heroes and a world of people who constantly show up when you need them are almost the same thing. It isn't a bad thing in itself. On some level, it's probably why we watch the show. It's just frustrating that the story's morality is bleeding into its mechanics, when some separation would help keep the fights more interesting. This is a pet peeve of mine, and I understand that most HeroAca fans won't care as much, if at all, but it's become enough of a pattern that I want to address it. Either way, feel free to let me know. See ya.